And if it's gonna disrupt oh wow, we really thank God for modern day tech, because yeah, like it's recording. Oh wow, like it's recording Paul's call and we're here. So yeah.
Amazing. The time to join us. So my name is Amra. I'm the co-founder and general partner at Accelerating Asia Ventures. Accelerating Asia, we work across Southeast Asia and South Asia, and we run an accelerator and VC fund headquartered out of Singapore. So we started in 2018. We currently have 90 portfolio companies across the region, and growing. We just took in 10 more companies literally 2 weeks ago. So it's been very busy on our end. We invest in early stage companies, so pre-series A companies. And we love to invest in companies that have impact embedded into their business model. And happy to talk a little bit about, how we select them, how we track that as well as part of today's conversation. I think maybe something else that I can chat quite a bit about is how we work with the investors in our fund, communicating the impact to them, because I'm sure, as some of you know, it's probably not top of mind for them. They're more interested on returns of the fund as opposed to impact. Prior to Accelerating Asia, I used to work for UN Women, running their global social entrepreneurship program, with a key focus on Africa and APAC, finding solutions that were creating impact for women and girls around these regions. So yeah, I will pause there. Thank you very much for having me today, and happy to take any and all questions later.
Thanks, Amra. Gladys, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sophia. I hope you can hear and see me clearly. So my name is Gladys. I coordinate the program at Shared Value Hub. And what we do is we accelerate and commercialize transformative climate solutions. And what we aim to do is just to work with entrepreneurs within the climate change space. And the whole idea is, how do we actually accelerate these entrepreneurs who are creating solutions to address climate change? And we've been doing this for the last 4 years, augmenting on, previous experience, through consulting, just supporting our such entrepreneurs. With the Shared Value Hub, we now design solutions specifically for entrepreneurs that are mainly either mitigating or adapting to climate change, and designing solutions that are aimed towards climate change. So mainly we work across 6 ecosystem and climate sensitive sectors. These are clean and modern energy, food and agriculture, water and sanitation, ocean and landscape, circular economy, as well as cross-cutting themes such as gender, diversity, and inclusion, because we realize, for instance, women are mainly affected by climate change. So technically, what we aim to do is we support these enterprises through tools, through resources, through frameworks that they're able to design economically viable models that are that they're able to innovate with climate solutions in mind, that they are also able to connect and network with other ecosystem players. Our work mainly is across Africa, and we've so far supported more than 200 enterprises and counting, and definitely we really are happy to be parts of this discussion, because if you look at climate change is one of the is one of the environmental issues that really are affecting small and growing businesses.
Thanks very much, Gladys, for introducing yourself, and I invite Charity. You're next. Please feel free to introduce.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Sophie. Thanks for having me in this session today. So my name is Charity Njuguna. I lead strategy at TWIFund. I also lead communications, part of the founding team. So TWI Fund started in 2022. We are 2 years old. We just celebrated our 2-year birthday. And so TWI Fund started as a platform for matchmaking 2 years ago, but we have evolved into what you would call an ecosystem enabler. So we work in the grassroots impact sector here in Kenya, and our work is to broker partnerships for both funding organizations and the grassroots organizations working on the community level. So we support the work of social entrepreneurs, community-based organizations, civil society organizations, and so on. So we do this through partnerships, through capacity building, and I guess that's going to be the focus of my brief presentation later. Thank you so much. I look forward to this session.
Charity. Yes, the same with me. I look forward to learning about how you put ESG in practice in your incubation program. So, yeah, the first question is, Gladys and Amra, could you provide a definition to what ESG mean? I mean, a while ago when we were taking a sense check of how many people know about ESG, and you've seen that not many people know about it. So, are you able to provide a definition on what it is, what is its components, and how important is ESG in today's businesses and investment landscape? Maybe we can start with Gladys, and then we go with Amra.
Yeah, let me just unmute. So thank you so much. And I think even before we talk about the what, I think it's important to just understand about the why. So of course, we are represented here by accelerators, incubators, investors, as well as member organizations, and we realize we are at the forefront of shaping the next generation of businesses. We support businesses through our different programming, and ESG is actually critical, especially in preparing these businesses, especially for long-term success. And the essence of ESG is how is it able to be inbuilt into your program so that you can prepare these businesses. And going now to what ESG is, so mainly it's a framework. ESG is a framework for evaluating a company's ethical practices, how sustainable a business is, as well as looking at issues related to social impact. And most organizations or most people actually view ESG from a risk element, in which they say for you to effectively manage, say, environmental, social, and risks related to governance, ESG becomes that framework of evaluating. And when you look at the different components of what E, S, and G stands for, so when you're evaluating a business or when you're evaluating an institution with the environmental lens, you're looking at how does this SME, how does this SGB actually interact with the natural environment? How is this SME utilizing their resources? Are they measuring the carbon footprint? What measures have they put in place to ensure that the infinite resources that we have are actually being utilized well? Are they thinking about long-term utilization of the resources they currently have? And why for accelerators and incubators this is important is because you're looking at natural resource being one of the key areas which most SMEs are in. Like if you look at agriculture, if you look at renewable energy, most SMEs actually are within the agriculture and some of these sectors that are actually relying on the environment to supply them with goods or services. So, and that's why the E is very important. And here, if you're looking at growing similar businesses, you'd want to really evaluate how is this business actually managing the resources in which they derive from the natural ecosystem. And then in the social element here, and I'm glad most of you are familiar with this because most incubators, accelerators are able to measure social impact. Here we're talking about the number of jobs created. We're talking about issues such as diversity and inclusion. You're talking about labor practices. practices, as part of your onboarding, maybe you want to find out how many female employees, male employees do you have within your organization. So with the social lens, I think there's actually advancement in this sector, and we've actually seen ESOs or incubators, accelerators, or even investors being able to grasp this element. And definitely this became more of an issue when we've seen rising, like when the Black Lives Matter became an issue, or issues such as diversity or LGBTQ became an issue. We saw that issues such as diversity and inclusion were put on the forefront. Initially, people never used to think about incorporating, including more women or including people of color within the institution. But with these initiatives, we've seen investors paying more attention to this. And then governance, definitely, this is very crucial. As accelerators, incubators, we want to ensure that the businesses we support are able to get investments. And we see G, which stands for governance, being very crucial, because an investor would want to find out, how is this business governed? Does it have a board? Looking at issues such as compensation, transparency, are there audited accounts? How is this SME, accountable to its shareholders and stakeholders? Are they reporting properly? When you look at product development, are they producing and reporting elements, products that are good for consumers? So here, when you look at governance, you're assessing or evaluating, how well governed is an institution, and we see that ESG has really become prominent with the rising pressure from the regulatory point of view. We've seen, more governments wanting disclosures on how, for instance, how taxes are being paid, and this is where governance actually comes into play. Corporate governance practices, looking at do SMEs have contracts? Are they disposing their waste properly? So there's a lot of regulatory pressure, and as incubators, accelerators, investors, is how do we actually push, support SMEs within this space to address these issues. We've also seen investors with right now, if you look at the capital that is there, we're seeing that not only are they looking at the financial performance of an SME, but they're also looking at the non-financial element. Remember, I talked about ESG being looked as a risk management framework, and one way of an investor being able to actually either do due diligence or even a financier being able to determine how viable is this business. They're looking at if this resource that this SME has, how finite or infinite is it, or how do they ensure that they are able to stay in business and scale their business in multiple regions, depending on, for instance, climate-related risks. And we've seen, especially with the advent of climate change, especially on the environmental and on the investment landscape, a lot of, even right now when you go to a bank, they're looking at some of this financial risk from a climate-related lens. And this is actually informing decisions, or even access to capital for some of this elements. So definitely this is a space that we need to champion, even as we prepare SMEs to either scale, access funding. How do we ensure that they are thinking about their natural resource? How do they think about the jobs they're creating, how inclusive their businesses are, and then lastly, how are they governed? Are they governed ethically? Are they transparent? Are they accountable to their stakeholders and shareholders? As a result, being able to either scale and attract more investment.
Thanks, Gladys. Amra, would you like to chip in?
Yeah, so I think Gladys covered a lot of it, so I won't repeat any of that. What I will say is that I think ESG has become a very popular term over recent history, and it can be very confusing. There are lots of different ways to measure ESG or measure impact. But I think a lot of organizations or frameworks are coming at it from a risk management perspective, and Gladys mentioned that. But I actually see ESG as an opportunity. ESG is more impacting, when you're looking at the different frameworks, it's more looking at how a particular company is run. Do they have the safeguards in place? And is this a risky investment for me as an investor or a donor? Where I think we could look at it more as an opportunity as well, and looking at, okay, what is the impact of these decisions or these frameworks in place in an organization? I will say my observations are over the past, like, I don't know, 15 years of doing this, is that most investors still want returns first. So although it is important to have in an organization, it is usually secondary depending on who you're seeking money from or who your company's seeking money from. It has become much, much more important for if you're dealing with institutional investors or, you know, institutional donors as opposed to, you know, individuals. And I think the kind of investment world is still very, very separate to the donor or grant funding world. So where, you know, you put a lot of emphasis on ESG and impact measurement on, you know, the latter, the former still sees it as kind of a nice to have. But I think it's an opportunity to be taken advantage of, because you can tick multiple boxes with multiple different stakeholders by having the same framework in place and maybe positioning it differently to different stakeholders. I'll pause there.
You, Gladys and Amra, and you know, I believe Gladys, you've already talked about this a while ago. We want to understand what is the relevance of ESG in impact incubation and the work that you're doing in the incubation. And could you please provide examples of ESG considerations and impact-driven initiatives? And what are the benefits of integrating ESG in incubators and accelerators? So knowing that a lot of our attendees today don't really know about ESG, and you know, how important is ESG in integrating into our work?
Yeah, thank you. So technically, as Incubators Accelerator, you know, we nurture early stage or growth stage businesses. So mainly most of these businesses, and this is just from experience, I can speak about Africa because the Shared Value Hub, most of our work is cut across Africa. And definitely the whole idea is most of these businesses are either solving either a social or an environmental challenge. And I think that's where impact is. So mostly if you are to classify impact within the ESG lens, you'd either classify impact from a social and environmental lens, and definitely, you know, us being able to nurture these startups is even when you're designing say say a mission, or to ensure that you're supporting these enterprises you know, through their journey as part of your incubation and acceleration problem, is first of all, and even in designing a value proposition, is one of the areas to consider is how is this business solving a social issue? How is this business solving an environmental issue? And remember, I started by saying ESG is a framework that is used to evaluate. So it's, look at it like as an evaluation tool. And especially for incubators and accelerators that are impact driven, you find that they can actually be able to use ESG as a framework to actually evaluate if at all their mission actually aligns, you know, how their mission actually aligns to the SGBs they support. And you can actually use the ESG metrics to assess effectiveness. I know there are different metrics that incubators, accelerators, or similar programs use to evaluate success of their programs. But here what you're trying to say is it possible to integrate ESG elements, or rather this matrix, for you to actually be able to assess you know, your mission you know, in supporting impact driven startups? Because you can actually be able to assess, and remember, you cannot assess an SME if yourself you've not integrated it within your institution. So first of all, it's deciding as an incubator accelerator what metrics do we need to integrate within our programming to ensure that we are delivering services and value to to SMEs that are aligned to ESG, and then from there, now taking this consideration to the SMEs you report. And if we were to look at impact-driven initiatives, say for instance around environmental, you'd be looking at looking at supporting SMEs in being able to do no harm to the environment. You'd also be able to ask them, look at the broader elements of their business. So are they able to create decent jobs? Because these are impact metrics that you can use to actually assess effectiveness of your program. So some of the social impact metrics you can use within your programming is check how many SMEs within our program are creating decent jobs, how many are integrating marginalized groups within their programming. How there are SMEs that are including that are fostering inclusivity. How well is communication to external stakeholders being done? And if you're to look with governance, how many SMEs have boards? And you will realize this is already happening, but then it's how do you make it deliberate within your ESO to ensure that you're able to use ESG metrics to either track and measure effectiveness of your program. And if we were to look at maybe some of the practical examples, say you're supporting SMEs within the agriculture space. If you're to think about innovation of your programming, or even the type of businesses you select, one way of attracting the right SMEs and integrating, say, the environmental impact metric within your program would be trying to look not just for your typical agriculture SMEs that are doing, either value addition or your farm to fork. You try to attract SMEs that are either doing regenerative agriculture, that are doing water conservation, that are doing climate smart agriculture. So you see, these different tweaks in your recruitment would actually help you measure, or rather make advancement towards the E element. And let's say, for instance, you're running an health accelerator or incubator program. You'd be looking at attracting SMEs within your program that are addressing the needs of the marginalized, that a health innovation that is actually reaching the unreached. This has a social element, and you can use this to even track progress. And if you were to look, for instance, if you are maybe attracting a renewable energy companies, you'd look at some of the issues such as including the community. So for instance, if one of your programs is either a mini grid project and you're running either a call for application, and one of the streams you'd want to bring on board is issues such as renewable energy companies, you'd put in an element of governance. So how involved is this renewable energy company in engagement of different stakeholders? And this also ensures that you're not integrating, you're actually promoting ethical business. You're working with SMEs that are actually involving the communities, consulting with them, promoting transparency. And just lastly, to give an example of what we do at the Shared Value Hub. So one of our impact metrics, because we are aimed at accelerating climate change solutions, for us, carbon measurement is very key. So we aim to actually target environmental, so we aim to measure. So one of the metrics we measure is, first of all, carbon footprint. Another metric we measure is climate mitigation and adaptation. But also social impact is, how is this innovation trying to address or trying to reduce vulnerabilities, especially for women who are highly affected by the impacts of climate change. And then another metric we check in governance is, how do we ensure that some of these companies actually integrate decision making, or have either women within their boards, or decision making at the community level is inclusive in one way or another. So as a result of us integrating this into our programming, or even these metrics into our programming, we're able to attract the right SMEs and definitely empower them through that journey using the ESG metrics as a framework.
Okay, so I think on the topic of ESG and impact incubation, I would just highlight that ESG is not only for impact incubation. It could be for any kind of company. And I mean, for example, Accelerating Asia Ventures, we are technically a generalist investor. So we don't have a specific focus on health or education or climate, although we invest across all of these areas. So obviously then tracking impact or ESG can be quite tricky because you have no common framework to say, okay, well, how do you compare a health investment versus a climate investment versus an education investment? They're all completely different. And this is something that we struggled with a lot over the past 7 years, and it's something really that we've only kind of fully got into place over the past, I'd say, 18 months, like a proper framework for how we're doing it. I think also the key thing to remember is that ESG specifically is about risk management. It's not necessarily proactive measurement. And that's where some of the other, I guess, frameworks or things kind of come into place. And so it's important to have those distinctions, because I think when people start to look at ESG specifically, they get bogged down in the details, which would usually apply to some massive corporations who have like impact teams and all of these kind of things. And, you know, you're trying to replicate this at a small level or at, you know, at a local level. And this is something that we had challenges with as well. And I would go as far as to say that, you know, even the more popular ones like the B Corp ones are often not suitable for organizations of our size, or organizations who are even smaller, which is the SMEs or startups that we're supporting, especially as they're going on and they're changing quite quickly, right? The whole purpose of our programs is to help them accelerate, which means that there are going to be a lot of pivots. And that oftentimes means that a metric that you chose at the start of the program may not be applicable halfway through the program or even in a year's time. So for organizations that are supporting these fast-moving kinds of companies, ESG measurement and impact measurement is really tricky. I think the other thing to think about is simplicity. How can you make sure that you're measuring enough so that you know what your impact is? Or if you are going down the risk management kind of, you know, mentality, that you are comfortable with making that investment or making that donation or working with them in the program as part of the screening, the initial screening. But there's also a balance between getting that and getting stuck in unnecessary bureaucracy and governance. And so I think that is something that really needs to be thought about when you're designing your impact metrics or how you're going about measuring this, is that one, these companies are changing all the time, so you need something long lasting. Two, we're all small organizations, so I think we're all small organizations. Generally, incubators and accelerators are not well funded, so it's important to think about how you're going to be managing this, and that it doesn't become, I guess, cumbersome for you. And then I think the final maybe thing that I'll say, or two things that I'll say, is that there is a big difference in measuring the impact of your program, the accelerator or an incubator, and the impact of the startup or the SME that you're supporting. And these are really two important differences to measure, especially when you're talking to donors or potential investors for yourself. Your impact is different from your investees' impact. And it can be powerful to have kind of both sets of metrics when you're talking to these kind of people, because you're able to really showcase how strong of a program you are on these particular businesses, and then how much they've grown during the program itself, because we can't actually really say that, you know, a year after graduation we had much impact on the company, right? We can only measure the program itself. So yeah, that's kind of what I'll wrap up with. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Benefits of integrating ESG. I think there are massive benefits here. If you step away from all of this like fancy terminology, at the end of the day, you are measuring the impact of your program. That's all it is. So there are lots of, once you kind of simplify all the terminology, it makes it easier, I think, to start implementing some different frameworks or even a basic level of a framework.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Amra. And I actually want to go to you first for the next part. How can, in getting started with ESG, what are the tools and frameworks for assessing current ESG performances for impact incubators and accelerators? And what are the practical steps for integrating ESG in the incubation process, being, an impact investor yourself?
Maybe I can share a little bit about our journey going down this rabbit hole. So when we first started, we started looking at like literally just Google ESG, and you'll have some pretty popular frameworks that come up, and pretty popular cited frameworks that come up. But once you start digging into them, it quickly, at least in our case, became really unrealistic for us to be implementing some of these things, but not just unrealistic, not applicable to our organization, the type of work that we do, and the companies that we're supporting. We then decided, okay, well, everybody's talking about the SDGs. This is like 7 years ago. Why don't we just like go to the SDGs and for all the different companies that come in, we'll make them choose one SDG that will track over their lifetime, and then one of the indicators under the specific SDG. This was like, in theory, a really good idea, because I was like, well, it's already set, and it's got explainers everywhere. There's tons of videos about the SDGs. Everybody knows the SDGs. Let's do it that way. But I think the reality is, like, when you're working with founders from, a lot of different backgrounds, maybe emerging markets, or especially, companies which don't come from an impact investing background, they just went out there, started their company, and it turns out, it's an electric vehicle company, but they didn't know anything about the SDGs. This is way more common than you think it is. There's two kind of impacts to this. Like, one, you have to do a lot of education during the program, specifically about the SDGs and like how to measure impact. And I think it takes away, in our case anyway, maybe you feel differently, but it takes away from time that could have been spent on growing the actual business, where instead we're talking about, oh, how do you manage this like specific metric, and like how do you understand it? And depending on where the company is in their life cycle, maybe they'll be out of business in 6 months' time. Actually measuring that impact is not going to make any difference to them. They just need to make money right now, right? They need to sell their cars, kind of thing. So you spending a bunch of resources and time on that is not necessarily the best use of like time or resources making this company successful. So that's kind of something that we realized. The second thing is that the metrics changed. So they would like pick one or two, but then we would realize, actually, this specific metric is not, it's not actually telling us much about the company itself, whether they're succeeding or not, whether they're growing. We're literally just looking at like, CO2 avoided kind of thing. So it didn't encompass everything that we needed to in terms of like looking at the progress of the company itself. So then we went down another rabbit hole. This is when B Corp started to be quite popular as well. And they were doing their whole tour of the region. And so we decided we'll give that a go. But this time before rolling it out to the companies, I thought, how about we get Accelerating Asia B Corp certified before we do that, so we can go through the process and see what it's like before we push this onto our founders. This was at the time where they had also launched a stripped down version of their framework, so in theory it should have been easier. We got pretty far into the process, actually. Literally, we had created everything, and then it was time for audit. And at that point, I was just like, this is too much work. Like, I'm pulling out. The reason is because B Corp focused a lot on the governance aspect of ESG, which is literally things like employment contracts, internal policies of the company, internal policies on like paper management, and a whole bunch of things, which I was like, how is this making us a better accelerator? You know, I'm measuring all of these things, but it's taking me so much time to create all of this documentation. I don't know how we're going to be able to maintain it and let alone track it. And I think others will have a different view of it, but I'm kind of, you know, the topic of this conversation was no nonsense approach to ESG. And I'm really a no nonsense person. So, you know, if I have to spend like 50% of my time updating paperwork when I could be out there doing something else and supporting the companies, I would rather be doing that. Not to say that measuring what you're doing isn't important, but I think there's a difference between what I feel like is bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake and actually creating and measuring that impact. So then we decided to create our own framework. So I started going down that rabbit hole and, you know, thinking, okay, well, what is like metrics that are applicable across our entire portfolio of, you know, companies, and, you know, starting to look at other funds and see what they're doing. And actually at that point, I stumbled across Temasek. So they're the big investor here in Singapore, Sovereign Wealth Fund. They have an impact arm called ABC Capital, and they published their impact investing framework. And it was amazing because Temasek is obviously investing for returns first, but ABC Capital is purely impact, as in impact investments. And they're a generalist investor like us. They're a little bit later stage, but really, really liked their kind of stripped down version of, you know, measurement collection. So we actually just literally copied and pasted their impact metrics, and that's what we're using for ours. They focus on a couple of key areas. So they have like how many jobs are created across the portfolio, individuals and micro enterprises that have gained access to financial services, patients provided to quality healthcare, students provided quality education, farmers gaining access to customized farming advice and information, and then metric tons of CO2 avoided through the work of the company. And that's like a really, really stripped down version, because all of our companies across the portfolio can answer at least one of those questions. And that's all we ask them to do. And then we have a separate tracking for gender lens investing. So how many, you know, startups are employing senior women, or that they have a female co-founder, or their work is specifically designed with gender in mind. Yeah, so I guess practical steps for integrating this. I would really start by thinking about, what do you actually need to measure as an organization? So apart from this, you know, these impact metrics, we also want to know whether our program has any impact on the companies themselves. And this is kind of what I mentioned earlier is probably most important, because this opens doors for us when it comes to donors and investors for our fund. They want to know, like, you know, during Accelerating Asia's program, have we actually made a difference to the companies that we're working with? Because it's all good and well, you know, all of these impact metrics being amazing, right? But you don't know if you contributed anything to that, and you can't claim to have contributed. Like, I don't know, what is the percentage that you can claim that you have impact on? We had a lot of debates about this, and basically what we settled on is, we know during the 3-month program is a pretty high touch program, so we can say that we're confident that our program has a high impact, and then we measure that monthly with the companies that we're working on. And what we're measuring here is different from the impact kind of metrics that I mentioned before. It's things like revenue, number of employees. It's like a growth metric that's specific to the company. So it could be like number of new customers acquired, or reducing the burn rate of their customers. So it can be a lot of different things specific to the company itself. And that has been super powerful. So we're able to show that funds raised as well during the program versus before the program versus after. So we're able to show that 100% of our companies have raised investment from external investors during the cohort. We can show a 3x growth between companies from when they started the program to when they ended. And these are super, super powerful for you as an accelerator program. Hopefully I answered all the questions there. I'll pause.
Yes, you did. Wow, fantastic. Thank you so much, Amra. Very chunky information that you've shared. Gladys, would love to know your thoughts on the same questions. What are the tools and frameworks you're using to assess your current ESG framework, and what are the practical steps for integrating ESG into the incubation process for those incubators who are here, who haven't done ESG framework in their programs?
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting. I think I was just laughing when she was I know, was talking about the impact, because I sit in the regional advisory board, and I think they're currently being reversed. So hopefully they'll they'll get better. Let me just say that in their defense. But all in all, yeah, there are different tools. So I think for an accelerator incubator is, first of all, just deciding at what scope do they want to play in. So there are those that either want an internal tool that they can actually be able to to assess and measure where they are on their journey. Remember, we said ESG is just an evaluation framework, like any other. You first of all just need to decide, especially if you're mission driven. What is the mission of your accelerator and incubator? What are you aiming to achieve with the SMEs that come to your program? What impact do you want to create? And then aligning yourself and looking at, do we need to either adopt an existing tool? Yeah, I agree with them. Not like what's out there in the global ecosystem. I think most tools have a global feel. So as I said, you need to just decide, at what level are you playing? Are you playing in the global? Do you want to get recognition, or do you want to really report publicly as a way of transparency? So of course they're voluntary, but also accredited tools that someone can use. Like I'm sure most of you have heard of the Global Reporting Initiative. So they've like provided a framework, and this is also because of standardization, and it depends with whom you're speaking to, especially when you're validating your data. So if you want to go on a global scale, or you want to really validate your data and rubber stamp, we've used a global reporting framework. So we have tools such as GRI, the B Impact, which can be, of course, a bit complex. But as I said, you need to decide, or the task force for climate change disclosures, just trying to decide, are you going to use an existing framework for reporting and disclosure, or do you aim to, make reference to it, but, come up with a simple way to do it? So we realized that the global frameworks were a bit technical. So what we did internally, we designed, as an institution, we've also designed a software solution for individuals, for ESOs, enterprise support organization, or even for SMEs just want to determine their sustainability journey. And so we designed it very, very easy. You're able to track within either 6 months period, determine where you are at baseline, and then maybe after 6 months or even after an year, depending on your reporting framework, what you want to measure. So it's all dependent, the scale as which as what do you really want to measure. And I think this has also been clarified by by the previous speaker. But technically, before even you start thinking about what tool do I use, what tool don't I use, you first of all need to ask yourself an accelerator or incubator. First of all, what impact am I creating? So the moment you're aligned with your strategy or aligned with your mission, it becomes very easy to either adapt or feedback using it what is existing. What I've realized is most programs, like you find most funders, especially if you're looking for grant funding or you're within a program, they have their requirements of what they need reported. So you'll find a funder saying, hey, we want you guys to really measure women, we want you guys to really measure jobs. So you find all the time the reporting or the ESG metrics keep changing. But if as an accelerator incubator, what you can actually decide is, hey, this is our impact measure, or this is our a framework for measurement, and then now say the funding, the funder can retrieve information for this particular, rather than you all the time having to come up with new metrics for measurement. So how do you actually define a metric or decide on what elements you're measuring first? So the moment you're aligned by setting your goals within your incubator accelerator program and setting that criteria so well, depending on why is it that you came about, why did we actually put about shared value hub? We wanted to accelerate entrepreneurs that are within the climate change space. So our metrics are very clear. So anyone else, a funder who is coming to support us, we showcase our metrics, what we aim to achieve as an institution. And then, okay, now when they say we want you to specifically report on this, it's already within our existing reporting framework. And definitely another way of just ensuring alignment is how are we able to actually take on those metrics for the SMEs we report on. Remember, we have it's how does an accelerator internally measure themselves, but also how do they augment their impact through the SGBs they work in. So looking at how does the data that SMEs produce actually enhance your impact reporting within your institution? So there are those two levels that you really need to be very clear on. And definitely it's a journey. As I said, it's not, I don't want really to say it's difficult, because I know we're already doing this. We're already measuring social impact. We're already measuring some of these metrics. Is how do we become deliberate and commit towards putting in place these frameworks or these avenues, so that we are able to actually communicate our impact in a systematic way, so that this year you don't generate this impact report, next year it's looking totally different, or even what you ask your SMEs to report on is different all the time. So I think USG really provides that clarity in terms of what it is. And there are so many indicators under environmental, there are so many indicators under social, and with there are global frameworks that provide guidance, like what I've just mentioned, GRI. You don't really have to take on anything. It's just, handpicking what really is works for you and is aligned to your incubator and accelerator mission. But then at the end of the day is how do we use this to actually enhance and being able to just report on these particular elements. I think it's very crucial for growth, because you're also able to see what impact are you creating within your institution, and sharing lessons of what has worked with other incubators, accelerators. I know some may say this is additional work, but it's already something that you're doing. It's not something that you're starting, I'm sure for most of you. Is this how do you structure it, in a way that you're able to standardize your impact process, looking at these three buckets?
Thanks very much, Gladys. So I just wanted to mention, if you have any existing framework you want to share with the other incubators and accelerators in the room, feel free to share it with Tess and I. we're as a network, we're building a tool library which collates a wealth of information from software platforms, templates, handbooks to assist other incubator members with operational efficiency, scaling, talent development and more, right? So, our learnings can be time consuming and expensive, and we believe that people don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's the frameworks, the templates are already there. So some incubators somewhere in the world may have already done what you're already thinking. So the goal is to reduce the effort, information asymmetry, right? So thanks very much, Amra, for sending over the link to the framework that you're currently using. And yeah, so because we're running out of time, I want to invite our last speaker. Having heard all this theory on ESGs, we want to know a real life example of an ESG in action. So, Charity, please share your experiences with the rest of the incubators attending today, and how do you integrate ESG in your capacity building programs at TUI Fund?
Great, thanks. Wow, I've learned a lot from Gladys and Amra. As I said, TUI Fund as an organization, we are not ESG impact, we are not ESG experts. However, we usually bring together partners such as these speaking today to share their wisdom and their learnings with the organizations we have under TUI Fund. Just to touch on our model again, we are an ecosystem enabler, the ecosystem being the grassroots sector in Kenya. So we started 2 years ago as a matchmaking platform, and the whole idea was have grassroots organizations join our platform. They get verified. They tell us about their active projects, what SDGs that they work with, and so on. And what this has evolved into is we have a very active and large database of community projects that are in Kenya, run by social businesses, run by nonprofits, community-based organizations, and so on. So far, what we've been able to achieve is we have more than 450 active verified projects. This is across Kenya, in some of the most far-flung counties and just around the country. We have more than 300 organizations using TUI Fund, the platform, as a donor mapping feature for their day-to-day activities. We have so far gotten around 11 organizations funded, and we have had 80 organization leaders trained on ESG, and that will be what I'll be talking about. So the reason why we focus on grassroots as opposed to SMEs or businesses or private businesses, so to say, is we believe that community organizations and organizations working at the grassroots levels have the solutions to most of the world problems. This is because they are directly involved and they are aware of the sentiment, the public sentiment in the communities that they work in. So, as I mentioned, we have around 300 active organizations under TUI Fund, and none of these belong to, we don't have a specific sector that we focus on, but as long as it's an impact organization working under the 17 SDGs, you are welcome to, start your profile and be a part of our network. So we have guys doing health, very many in education programs, very many projects in gender equity and so on. And the more we learn and interact with these organizations, the more we realize that the investing in the sustainability is how we make the world more resilient to current problems and future problems. So why we thought about bringing ESG as a pilot program or rather why we put together an ESG training program with the help of some partners, is because we feel like so far the conversation has been very top-down. All the ESG conversations have been led by corporates, very large organizations, and we wondered what is the role of these community organizations in this whole conversation about global sustainability and environment. And as I said, these organizations are very aware of how the global problems, the global environmental problems affect small communities, far-flung communities. How does it affect, the education of students in Turkana? How does it affect the agricultural productivity of a community in Kilifi, and so on? So we challenged ourselves, or rather this whole idea of ESG and sustainability training for grassroots organizations is there a bottom-up approach to how we look at sustainability and how we look at global sustainability? So in Kenya, most of the stock exchange companies, have very strong ESG programs already running. So are we able to share some of these learnings with the community organizations and have everyone think in that same direction? Does this mean that we're going to solve the issues, being faced globally and even at a country level better? That's the question. And so thinking of it this way as a bottom-up approach, we challenged one of the bigger, ESG consulting firms in the country, and we challenged them, are we able to take this very sophisticated information and learnings and frameworks and bring them down to a community level? Can we design a program for the leaders of these community organizations so that they can understand the basic principles, how to integrate basic principles of environment, social, and governance, how this can be an opportunity for them, as mentioned earlier? Will this help them attract better, funding? Will it give them access to green financing? Will it make them better partners to large organizations that are already working in these sectors? So basically, are they able to design better programs within the organizations, within their communities, and what are the opportunities that come with that? So as you can see on the slide, those were the listed objectives that we were working with. And we also wanted to create just a network of very sustainability sound local organizations. And what we covered really is the basic introductory ideas on the environment, about climate change, about energy efficiency techniques, waste management, circular economy, alternative materials, and so on. And during the course of this training, which was actually 3 days taught via Zoom, during the course of this training, we realized that organizations and the founders of these organizations are already attuned to the ideas of environment, social, and governance. It's just that it's not very structured. It's not very, we just haven't put the name ESG on it. Thanks, Tess. So for example, I can mention a community-based organization in the lakeside region of the country. It's a CBO that works with fisher women to try get them alternative forms, train them and get them alternative forms of business so that they can step away from this fisher woman life, which carries a lot of risk, both health-wise and both in many ways. And so part of the programs that they've designed for for the rest of the year and the next few years is how can they create, so they're training these women on how to create paper, but from papyrus, which is what grows in the Lake region and is a big menace for the Lake Victoria, if you're familiar. So this thinking already exists. It's more, how do we support it with now better frameworks? How do we support it with, more expert advice and so on? So that is also what we covered under social and under governance. A lot of these organizations need a little bit more restructuring, even as they learn and do a lot on the social side and environmental side. They still have ways to go on the governance side. I'm one of the people who voted governance as one of the difficult things to integrate when it comes to ESG, because these hundreds of organizations, we still cite that as the biggest problem for them. Environment, they have an awareness. It's just that as you continue to develop your programs in health, as you continue to develop your programs in education, as you continue to support the communities in these different ways, are we able to also be aware of the more pressing issues or other pressing issues such as environmental issues, and how can the two marry? Is it possible to kill two birds with one stone? Yes. And I'll get to that training, I'll get to that case example, yeah? Okay, those were photos down there. I don't know what has happened. But an example of an organization that sat in our pilot program, one of the 80 founders and leaders that we worked with over 3 days, is an organization called Andy Speaks for Special Needs Africa. So this is a nonprofit organization which has been active for years, and they work with children living with disabilities. And they work with different academic institutions, they work with different publishers, they work with the communities, the parents, and so on. So their main key program, their programmatic focus is basically special needs for children and the community. So I just want to, this case example just shows how they've been able to integrate environmental issues in their programs, in their current programs. So this program called Neurodivergence Nurture Nature, this is quite new. They just launched it this month. So what it entails is they've published books that shows, it's a book series, well animated, and it shows, how children with autism, how children with physical disabilities and other, and other challenges are able to be very active in planting trees and taking care of the environment and so on. And this book series has been made very accessible in different formats: audiovisual, braille, simplified text, images, and they are now working with schools to make this permanent fixture in their reading programs and so on. So this, to us, is a big deal because it shows that environment especially can be married with other social programs, and every social impact person or every social impact organization which has so much buy-in with the community is able to adapt the ESG principles, especially the environment ones, and be able to involve the whole community and the different factions of community that they work with in solving this global problems. So the training outcomes. So we did a pre and post survey, and we had some very good reviews. Most of the people, of course, anticipated challenges when it comes to financing these programs and this new form of programs. but a lot of the people feel confident to even learn more and explore different ways of merging environment, social, and governance. We are aware of the fact that this was very introductory. This was a pilot program. It's something that we want to focus on with partnerships and funding over the next few years. Our current goal right now is our current goal as well for us right now is also to create frameworks, or rather borrow from existing frameworks and just create something that's specific to community organizations. That way they know what to measure, how to measure, and so on. So that's it from us. That's one little showcase. Please reach out if you want to learn more and what our next steps are. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Charity, for sharing, how ESG is helping with your capacity building sessions in your program. So I would like to invite the rest of the speakers, Amra, Gladys, to join Charity for the Q&As. Does anyone have any questions that you would like to ask the speakers? Any questions? Okay, Mercy, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Gladys, Amra, and Charity for the amazing presentations. My name is Mercy Monene. I work with YGAP. We are an entrepreneur support organization in Kenya. We support impact entrepreneurs. My question is primarily to Amra and Gladys because they work directly with social entrepreneurs. The issue of tracking impact is one that has been a challenge, especially getting the data from the entrepreneurs. How have you ensured that you get the data that helps you build up on the impact that you're communicating to, say, your funders? I think that is one of the main challenges I have encountered in my line of work. So yeah, thank you.
Maybe I can start. So basically, I think that's a very good question. So as I said, ESG is an evaluation framework, or it's a metric. So what we do is we don't treat these metrics as, we don't collect this data at the end. So for us, how we've integrated this within our programming is, even when you are selecting the SMEs or when you're onboarding, first of all, it's normally in the, it's called what, in the call for application. So for instance, like right now we are running a cohort of women in clean energy. So as part of our application is we are looking for for enterprises that are meeting these metrics already. So remember, I said you need to just decide, you need to understand what's the mission of your organization and how mission focused are you in measuring this metric. So the moment you align your ESG metric to your mission and deciding what to measure as part of your programming becomes very easy. So for us, we've identified some ESG metrics that are critical for our programming. So meaning that it guides how we put out our call for application, how we select, so even how we do our due diligence, because we are targeting enterprises that are at a particular level, meaning that we've started collecting data at that initial stage. Yeah, so that we don't start asking these SMEs, show us your, and some of the issues we aim to determine is, first of all, are you even measuring your carbon footprint? And most times, most people don't know how to. So it means when you are designing, say, our coaching or our training program, this becomes an element of coaching and training, because if this is part of our gap assessment. So that's what I'm saying. It's first of all understanding, the impact metrics that you want to really be measured at the beginning and how they align to the E, S, and G, and using them from the beginning to the end. And of course, you've seen cases, and we struggled with this a lot, where we had different funders having various interests, like we specifically want to measure jobs. But you realize the more specific you are, the more broad you are with your metrics, you'll find that most, say, funders or even investors are looking for, similar metrics. And so it's just, how do you ensure that you've already started measuring them, through selection, onboarding, due diligence, so that even when you're doing your baseline and you're doing your end line, you've already measured, these metrics, and you can be able to report on different elements. And yeah, data, I know is a big thing, but the moment you've integrated, so for instance, at baseline or at the needs assessment, one of the questions you'd ask is, do you measure your carbon footprint, or do you measure your consumption of energy? And maybe someone says no. You're now training at baseline, it's at 0. So you now capacity build them, on measurement. And at midline, maybe you just measure and say, oh, fine, have you started? So it becomes an impact matrix, and this SME can actually start bringing some of these behaviors within their programming. I don't know if that makes sense.
Do you have any further to add to that question? So let me repeat the question. Tracking impact has been quite challenging, right? It's not just, we've heard this a couple of times across our membership, where our members always say, it's very hard to actually go back to the entrepreneurs and track their measures. So how do you, ensure that you get the data that you need to communicate to the funders, investors, donors?
So during the program itself is obviously easier because they're sitting with you, or you have communication with them every day. So I won't really talk about that, but I think Gladys mentioned a really good point, which is kind of being clear on the actual metrics that you're tracking, so that you're not changing it halfway through, or that you can actually see progress. And then the second thing that I would add to that is trying to make it as streamlined as possible, because I guess look at it from the company or the participant's point of view. The last thing you want to be doing is filling out metrics forms, right? So how can you make it as streamlined and easy for them as possible? And if that means, like, paying for particular tools to make it easier, or getting someone in to literally like call them. I know some incubators and accelerators have everybody's phone number, and they literally get them on the phone and call them and like, hey, blah, 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 you need to submit, or just like answer these 3 questions for us on the phone right now. And then what we do as well, because we invest in all of the companies that we accelerate, we have information rights as part of our investment terms. And so the companies are basically in breach if they don't kind of like give us the information that we're requiring. That's the stick. Honestly, that's the stick, and I would rather not use the stick, although we can. We kind of remind them about it. But I think the carrot is, if we know more information about how your company is doing, we're more likely to be able to support you with whatever comes up. And so how we frame it to the companies is that, if you tell us about your current fundraising round, which is kind of tied in with all the other impact metrics, then we can help you fundraise. Or if you tell us that something's not going right, then we can help you deal with that issue. But we're only going to know if you're giving us the information. So that has probably been more impactful and more successful in terms of getting information from people. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the main points.
Great. Thanks very much, Amra. So because we only have 4 minutes, we need to have a hard stop. So if anyone has any burning questions you want to ask the speakers, please send it over to us, and we can, forward to the speakers and get that addressed for you. So, just want to summarize some key takeaways. What I've heard is that ESG is critical, embedded into your programs. Use it as a framework to track and measure the success of the quality of your programs. And I like what Amra says, streamline the impact data reporting of your incubatees because you don't know if your programs are actually uh, helping them if there is no data, right? Data is very important. So invest in a tool to make the process efficiently. So thanks very much again, Amra, Gladys, and Charity for sharing valuable insights today. Before we wrap up, anybody would love your input on future workshop topics. Pollinate Impact is member-led. So we want to hear your thoughts, right? Let us know what you need and we will try our best to customize our services to meet the needs and the challenges that you're currently facing. So please take a moment to participate in if you're interested in contributing in future sessions, let us know as well. So our mission is to resource and support the impact incubation industry, which is currently undeserved, right? So and it's a uh, is a new industry for many of the in sub-Saharan Africa, South India, around South Asia and Southeast Asia. So our mission is really to give support to you so that you can focus on what matters the most, which is enabling entrepreneurs. We're here to enable you. So if you're not a member of Pollinate Impact yet, we invite you to join our dynamic network of visionaries, change makers, and leaders, all united by a common goal, which is creating a resilient ecosystem where incubators are collaborating with each other, and many more. I would love to share more. So if this is exciting for you, please scan the QR code. Tess, would you be able to share the Mentimeter with the code of the application form, or you can click the link that I will send. Um, here is the application link, and if you have any questions before you actually apply to become a member of this growing network, I've sent my email address here, also my boomerang. I you can book a 60-minute slot with me. So yes, so don't forget to subscribe to our event calendars and stay updated with our upcoming sessions. I just want to highlight, right, we're 2 months away from our annual member gathering. We call it the Pollinate Potluck. It will be held across 3 days in December 4 to 6, Bangalore, India, which is the Silicon Valley of India. Very exciting. It's really, the time when our global community convenes in person, share ideas, and be inspired, right? So that the ticket price is inclusive meals, accommodation, airport transfers, and immersion visit to some of the local incubators in Bangalore. So if you would like to know more, here is the link. Here's the registration. And we have an info session next week, actually. So I've also included the registration link for it. Yeah, please don't forget to follow us on social media. And we may reach out to you to gather feedback on a LinkedIn post. And again, thank you everybody for sticking until the end. We look forward to seeing you at our future sessions and hopefully this December in Bangalore. Tess, sorry, I wasn't able to see. Were you able to share that QR code?
Yeah, so I was able to share the QR code and as well as sharing the feedback form as a poll. So please let us know what your thoughts have been on the session. And I think to say thank you to everyone and to the speakers for being here today.
Grateful.
Yeah, so over to you, so.
Yes. Thanks very much again, everybody. Amra, Gladys, Charity, and all the people who have tuned in today. So we'll see you again very, very soon.
All right, thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.